Welcome to the Independent Characters. This is episode 220. I'm Carl.
I'm Josh.
And we've got a couple guests with us that we're going to introduce in just a moment. Let me go over what the premise of this show is this time, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we used to do, and we're doing it again. We used to do a show called The Warrior Lodge. And what The Warrior Lodge is really a moderated discussion around various points that are going on currently within Warhammer 40,000 or Warhammer 40,000 universe, what have you. So we're trying things a little bit differently this time. We've got the video, obviously, going on, but we've brought in a couple guests who are listeners of the show, regular listeners of the show, who are also on our Discord channel. And so they were very kind to join us for this show. And so let's first start with Hank. Hank, what's your handle on the Discord channel?
It's actually listed as Hank. Unfortunately, I couldn't get that from Discord because there's somebody else out there, I guess, with my name. So I use TOAAE, which is an old acronym I've used since I was like 8 years old and can't divorce it.
All right. Well, there you go. So, Hank, how did you kind of get into Warhammer 40,000? Let's get a quick synopsis of how you got into it and then what brings you here today.
Yeah. So this summer is my 20th year since I started. Started when I was 13 because I was grounded from video games all summer for failing a middle school class.
Nice.
And I rode my bike down to the local gaming store. It's called the Little Shop of Magic, which started as a closet. Like it was you had to go down a hallway behind another store, and it was this tiny room, and expanded over time. And he's actually since moved to Vegas, and he's got a great store. It's going great for him. But I would go there because I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I honestly don't remember how I started that. I think Foxtrot, the comic, might have got me into Dungeons and Dragons. And then eventually, being in that store, saw Warhammer miniatures. They had a beginner's tournament. They gave you 800 points. My first games were in this tournament. And 20 years later, this is still my primary hobby.
Nice. This is a great introduction.
Yeah, that's a great journey.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And what did that middle school class do for you anyway? Right?
It was concert band. I failed it because I missed a concert.
If you had passed that, we would not have you here today.
Very, very likely.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So glad you're with us. Thanks so much. And we also have Neris. Neris, give us the lowdown on how you got into Warhammer 40K.
So I actually got into Warhammer 40K because I happened to walk into my local game store while they were doing a couple games. This was back in 8th edition, so nowhere near as long. And I was also just out of high school trying to find work. So it's been a very slow progress in building up anything. But it's been an interesting couple of years. Okay. Found you guys actually shortly after I started playing.
Nice. Were we a help or a hindrance to your playing?
I think you guys were helped me buying.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not so much the playing aspect.
Guilty of that ourselves.
I have definitely fallen victim of our own Show of Force episodes. We did the Adeptus Custodes Show of Force a while back, and I was like, I'm doing these. Yeah. Steve came by the other day.
Yep.
And he's playing Adeptus Custodes, and I looked over at my one spot in my shelf that still had the Adeptus Custodes, still in the condition I bought them, including a couple tanks. And I was just like, Steve, take these. It's all yours. Here's these unopened bike boxes.
Yeah.
You're going to use them.
Yeah.
I am not. Have them. I'm embarrassed.
It's good to focus these days.
I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
Fell victim to my own mentality. All right. And so you've been playing since 8th edition.
Yeah.
Not a huge long length of time, but that was a great time to get in.
Yeah.
And that actually leads kind of into a little bit of our topic.
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
So okay, well, guys, thank you so much, or folks, I should say, thank you so much for joining us. I was super excited that you both leaped up and were interested in joining. And for those of you, by the way, in the Discord channel who wanted to be in but were just a little late, we will do this again.
Yeah.
Assuming it's not an unmitigated disaster. Episode 220, the unmitigated disaster. Okay, let's go into our
elite choice.
Elite choice here. Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Sure. So I went with Martin Jones, and he did a Primaris Captain and a Primaris Ancient for the Mortifactors. And these are kind of, it's a Ultramarine successor, I believe. They have the Ultra U on there. White, black, red trim on that. And he just did a fantastic job with the execution of this paint scheme. Like the detail on the faces, the weathering, just the contrast in there.
The power sword.
Sword, yeah, that like crackling energy effect on the power sword. It's just really, really well done. And then there's some freehand on the Ancient's banner. And this is a start to a new force. I think there's maybe 5 intercessors in addition to this. So there's not a whole lot else to the force yet, but it's all just incredibly well done. And it just really stood out to me. So I wanted to call that out for a job well done. And this is kind of thing that like seeing, 7 models to the start of a force that are done to this caliber, like makes me really excited to see what the rest of that force evolves into. So yeah, well done.
Yeah. Interesting enough, we were talking last episode about shortages of models being available right after a launch of 10th edition.
Right. Yep.
Philip Mendoza ran into this trying to get a Hellbrute. And so he kit bashed the new Demon Prince with some AdMech bits to make this Hellbrute. And not only is the kit bash really cool,
yeah,
I think the paint job's fantastic on it too.
As soon as I saw this one, I had a feeling you were going to call it out.
Might be a little Zeech themed.
Yeah,
so yeah,
sure.
but this is a fantastic way to, continue to experience the hobby. And a lot of times I think that especially newer players, when they can't get a particular model, like there are ways around that. And this is a very appropriate substitution for a Hellbrute in many ways. In fact, I think it looks a lot, that Hellbrute that came out with I don't remember what the starter set was that had the Chaos Hellbrute in it.
Yeah.
I don't really use that one because it's just fixed on the
first
weapons.
monopose plastic one, yeah.
Yep. But I mean, this is basically the same size and kind of has that feel to it. It's like that organic, but also part mechanical feel.
It's got that very like Hellbrutes and Demon Princes kind of are both, crossing the lines of the mechanical demon power armor kind of all conglomerated into one. So yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, well done.
All right. So fantastic. I think we're ready to get started. And one of the points about this particular, I almost call it show force, the Warrior Lodge episodes, is that the objective of the show has always been, will and always will be, how do we make you feel like a part of our gaming group?
Right. Yeah.
And, as we were bantering this idea around, sometimes we bring in our friends who are involved to get in the discussion. But we thought, what better way than to actually bring the community as part of the discussion and have part of this. So we've done this before. I don't think we've done it to this degree before, but I'm very excited about where we're going. And I think we're going to have a great time with both Neris and Hank. So
putting our money where our mouth is as far as making everybody feel like a part of the community and bringing some of the community into the conversation, the discussion,
all that podcasting. Money.
Yeah. All that juicy content.
Oh, yeah. All right. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to launch right into hobby progress and games play.
Sounds great.
All right, welcome back. We are now going to launch with some hobby progress, and I figure we will start with Neris. Neris, what have you been working on lately, and how's it going?
What I've been working on lately is my Eradicators from Indominus that I started back at the beginning of 9th edition.
Fair enough. Listen,
sitting
you're not the only
painted.
one.
Mine are still on sprue. So.
Yeah, mine have been sitting primed with basically all the red done. So now I've been going back and filling in the black on them, and then I'm going to go in and finish up the actual gun. So I have all 6 of these things finished finally.
Nice. And what chapter are you doing them as? Is your own?
No, I'm doing them Flesh Terrors.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So that ties into one of my notes later.
It's a great. That's a great chapter too. That's a great chapter. I love them. All right. And Hank, what about you?
Yeah, I had it's funny, after 8th edition when I did so much stuff, 9th edition starting the pandemic, and then just going on.
Awesome.
I didn't do nearly as much. And as you guys talked about in your own episode previously, a new edition feels great. So now all of a sudden I got stuff out. The new edition rules changes some things. So it's like, well, I don't have this model, so I got to start doing this. So it's been a lot of just filling in holes. To go on the point of stuff you started in ninth, I'm on my desk. There's some B Snagger boys who got all their colors blocked in when that box came out almost 3 years ago, 2 years ago. I forget when it was. So they're going to get finished soon, hope soon. But the big thing is I've been just converting and preparing models to fill in holes. So like I didn't have a Beast Boss. The actual model itself, I think, is very well made. I just don't like how busy it is. It doesn't have the orc silhouette because he's got so much of those trophies on. So I wanted something different. So I converted one using the Beast Boss torso from the Squirgosaur and legs from Assault on Blackreach, because like all orc players that have been around for more than a decade, I have a ton of Assault on Blackreach sets. So I just found a war boss that I chopped the legs off of. Other than that, I've converted some trucks because no two orc vehicles really should ever look alike.
Correct.
So
yes.
I've done a few. I did one as a squig wagon because it was a second-hand truck I bought from a guy, stripped the paint off of, but like it was poorly constructed. And as I was cleaning it, I was just like, this is never going to look good. So I'm like, let's just do something different with it.
It's poorly constructed. It's already orked.
So it was perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah, just the guy's feet were 3 feet above. I'm like, they don't quite levitate in my world, but thick glue running along seams. Like he didn't want this to come apart, and it was a lot for me to take it apart in places. But the point was, I was able to convert it into this. So it's supposed to look like a covered wagon. Because it's the Beast Snaggers truck. I converted another one out of a Rhino, which all orc players have done at some point. That was just fun using some older orc bits I had, the claw from an old orc Death Dread, which is only like this big. It's a tiny model.
Yeah.
It's smaller than a Killacanus now. Stuff like that, and then some run hurts because previously I never had run hurts. My Gretchen just ran around doing whatever they wanted. Because of the current rules, the run herd comes with the squad. So it's like, okay, I got to build some run herds.
Nice.
So it's largely been that. I'm almost done building stuff, and I've started priming it. And so then I can move into, I airbrush orc skin, and then I just paint everything else by hand. So that's the big part. I always do it like that. I try to, whatever my group is, I try to get it primed into the skin all done at once. And then after that, I break them down into smaller groups to do all the other stuff.
Sure. I mean, you pick the largest surface area to go that color and then work down from there. I mean, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, and it's smart, especially with huge batches of mobs or vehicles or whatever you have.
Yep.
Smart.
Yep, for sure. Well, listen, the only thing I've done in this last week, and I've been, for those who, I don't know if I mentioned it last episode, but I've quit my job. And so I turned in my resignation, and I've been doing a lot of meetings as I'm kind of offboarding and everybody's throwing stuff at me. So I've been pretty busy. And just a point about that too, the work has been incredibly stressful. It's been a great experience, but it's been very stressful. And I've always said, when people would give me a bunch of grief about getting things commission painted, I've always said, I can earn more money. What I can't get back is time.
Yeah, so true.
And that's literally the reason I left my job, was because, as we've mentioned, Doug had passed, and it just got me thinking about, I'm stressed out all the time, and I'm waking up at 2 a.m. and I'm thinking about work. If it all ended tomorrow, I don't want my time to have been spent like this. So I'm going to find something I'm super passionate about, do that. I'm fortunate that I have some time to figure that out, but mostly I'm going to spend time with friends and family, and we'll double down a little bit on this too. So
absolutely.
So, okay. So off my soapbox, the only thing I got accomplished was we completed the assembly. Shell had completed the assembly of Predator. You said there was a lot of glue on that the orc vehicle. So we cleaned that up a little bit. She did a great job. I'm being sarcastic, but she did go, I've got glue all over my fingers.
It's a rite of passage.
Welcome to the party. Yeah. But she very much wanted to convert the vehicle's like weapon systems. So like the las cannons, to cut off the tips, put on the tips for the they have like those dragon or gargoyle headed tips. So
the classic chaos.
Yeah. So we sat down and I walked her through why you don't want to use clippers to do that, but we have this little saw that we use to cut those off. So it's a nice, we make sure it's flat and it lays flat. And so we got all those glued on. She's very happy with the vehicles. I just got to get Caleb. And if I talk to Kat, and Kat's like, Caleb and I want to come down there and do painting. And I'm like, good. Caleb needs to come help us with,
Perfect.
We need to come help us get us started on these Night Lords so I can get them at least somewhat close to what he did for her kill team. So that is all I've done. Didn't accomplish much.
You're going to be painting those, or is Shell actually going to go full hobby on it with lightning bolts and Night Lords? And
sometimes the video is the only way you can see the look I just gave you.
It adds so much.
Listen, I would love for Shell to, and she can't hear me right now, but hopefully she doesn't listen to the episode. Please, nobody post go listen to the episode. But I think I'm probably going to end up doing large portions of the painting, but I would like for her to learn how to do it. And honestly, I think she would be like, help show me how to do this. Yeah. But it's interesting because it's a very advanced paint scheme.
Right. Yeah.
And a very difficult thing for a new person to get in. But I'm sure there are pieces where it's like, okay, airbrush this. Like, let's get a little practice with the airbrush in. I'll get her started on what she can do, and then I'll jump in for the more complicated pieces of it, hopefully. And then I'll call Caleb and go, I'm crying. I can't do but I think we'll figure out. But she's not the kind of person that just, she's not the kind of person that just wants to be like, you go paint my thing. For me, like, she'll want to be involved. She did 60-70% of the assembly.
Stuff. Which is, it's fantastic.
So
embrace the hobby. That's really cool.
And she just needs somebody to sit there and help her do it. And so, one of the things about not having the job too is I'm going to be able to spend a lot of time with her. We were able to hang out the other night, just floating in a pool, and it was like, no worries. Why did I not do this before?
Yeah, it's a good way to be.
What about you? What have you been working on, Josh?
Yeah, so last episode I had been building a bunch of terrain, and I did continue that to a small extent, and that I built one more building, which is the Battle Sanctum. And this is the Sisters of Battle, ruin building that actually came with the statue and some rules for that, which I didn't get it for Sisters of Battle reasons. I wanted a big piece of ruined terrain to just throw down in the middle of a board. So I got that built up, and then I got everything primed and kind of some base colors put in there for all so now it's kind of 3 sets of ruined buildings that I have going in there. So just getting the kind of foundation started of the painting process of that one. So hopefully I can have, like if I have another game day at my house, I can have a couple full 40K games and supply boards, tables, terrain, everything like that. I definitely have, 1.5 tables worth of stuff now. So this is just kind of rounding out my terrain collection.
Listen, and the reality is, if you know that's coming and we have time, I have four or 5 tables.
And there's a lot of people in our group will easily have a table or 2 worth of terrain, but it's nice to just be able to, hey, just bring your minis. I've got everything else. Come show up and let's play some games.
Yeah.
So that was good motivation for me. I did purchase a couple things because I did end up throwing a small game day at my house.
You did
last weekend
for your birthday.
For my birthday. So just had a couple friends over for some games. So I actually got a single Table War 66 by 44 or 60 by 44 inch mat, and then cut it in half so that I could have 2 tables for 500-point games, combat patrol, whatever. Something.
What did you use to cut it in half?
I had a thin, straight piece of trim from all the woodwork stuff that I do. So just something that's a low enough profile to get a really nice new sharp blade for essentially a box cutter.
I talked to Todd at Table War because he was cutting some mats at one point, and he uses I can't remember exactly the tool he uses, but it's like not a carpet cutter, but it's something along those lines. Like, it's specifically designed for cutting this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll get one of those. And I looked it up. It's like a $60 tool.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh. Never mind.
I have like a nice quality box cutter that I just had a brand new blade on and just applied pressure with a straight edge and got a really nice clean cut out of it. So yeah.
I actually had thought you bought those. So
So I bought
You
one
did,
and then
but
made
then,
two
yeah.
out of it, which just mathematically was financially to my benefit versus buying two small mats. So
Okay.
that way, if I ever want to host a combat patrol game or game day or something like that, or just get a couple small games, again, getting ready for that kind of small mini game day at my house last weekend. I've got the two mats now plus two of the boards that you add together to make another 30 by 44, I think is what the game size is. Yeah. For small scale games.
Yep.
So that's the big stuff. I built 10 Reavers. I've been doing a lot of list building now that 10th edition is out. Playing around with things, especially focusing on the Sharkadons and what direction I want to take them. So I've already had assembled the Leviathan combat patrol. I was making some boarding action lists and making some 1,000-point lists, making some 1,500-point lists, and finding out what models overlap between those lists, or trying to make as many models overlap in those lists so that I can prioritize what models I need to get kind of the most bang for my buck out of a handful of minis, and paint the fewest minis to get me the most results and options of how to play the game with that army specifically. So, been doing a little work towards that. Got all the Leviathan models primed and built some Reavers in anticipation of using a handful of those in larger games down the road. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Yeah, I went into my garage of opportunity and pulled out just tons of chaos stuff. So we really don't need to buy anything else for Shell's army. It's just a matter of, or even mine, quite frankly. Like, I'll be surprised if we don't buy a box here or there, but for the most part, we're good. I've got
that's the same. Like, from all the years, I've got everything I need. I have all the bits that I need. It's just what to prioritize and kind of what list do I want to build towards. And
you know what else you got? You got gifted a
Table
War half case.
Table War, the mini case there, which is the perfect transport size for a small game of 40K. So
Table War.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Table War.
Yeah, I had grand designs to do something with 3 different. You got it now. It's all you. I'm glad you're going to get some use out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's roll into games played, and let's go you and I, and then we'll go to our guests real quick.
Sure.
So you did have a hobby day at your place for your birthday, which was awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for your wife for doing all the effort in hosting. Yeah. I do want to point out that the happy birthday on your cake, the thing literally caught fire from the candles on it.
Not many candles as a fire hazard.
Which was really funny. So I did play a 500-point game versus Sky. And I played Thousand Suns. He played Marines. And it was great. Terminators at that level, super powerful though. Yeah. One of the interesting things that came out of a game that size, 500 points, below the 1,000-point kind of minimum in the book,
right,
is the not objectives, but the cards you can play for improving
stratagems.
The stratagems.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so old. The stratagems become significantly more powerful in smaller games in some ways.
A few abilities, absolutely.
Yeah,
also,
and I hadn't really considered that before, but when you're re-rolling hits and misses against a third of my army, because I've only got 3 or 4 units, that is a significant difference than you're re-rolling hits and misses against 1 unit in a larger army.
Correct.
And that became problematic for me.
You were talking about the Oath of Moment, which is not a stratagem, but it's actually the Marines' ability.
Or excuse me, the ability
it's their
they get to
detachment
choose.
ability. Yeah.
But even some stratagems were becoming really problematic for me.
So one thing after your game, and then after my game with Jody, because I was also playing Marines using Oath of Moment.
Yeah.
That I noticed, like, I reread the Combat Patrol version of that specifically, and instead of rerolling hits and wounds in that scale of game, you only get to reroll hits.
Right.
So they've addressed that in small scale games. But
let's talk about Combat Patrol, because I was kind of hot on Combat Patrol last episode where I hadn't played it yet. And I played a game of Combat Patrol with Steve, which was great. Steve came over. We sat down with our Combat Patrols and played. I played Thousand Suns. Steve played Custodes.
Yeah.
And so I have some thoughts about Combat Patrol. Not my favorite way to play the game. One, yes, they do address some things like Oath of Moment, and it works differently in Combat Patrol. Combat Patrol is not just a different way to play 40K, it's also kind of a different game in a sense. Like you're getting a taste of what 40K is, but you're not getting the full flavored meal. And after having played, eaten the full flavored meal, then going to diet 40K, I was kind of like, wait a second.
Oh, because certain units have
very
missing
different.
Abilities.
Yeah, they're missing abilities.
Stats are the same, but abilities are different or modified.
Yes, very much so. I'm glad you clarified that for me, because I don't think I was getting my point across well there. So playing with Steve was fun. Like, it was definitely a learning game. But I felt like, I'm already past this. And what was interesting is coming to your house, I almost switched and played Eldar that day.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I'd only played one game of 10th before with Thousand Suns, and I was like, this is complex enough. I want to keep playing the same army for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get the hang of playing that army, and then I will come and try something different when I'm ready for a different flavor. I don't know why I'm doing this big analogy about food, but maybe I'm hungry. Also, I can smell the spaghetti shells cooking. But so Combat Patrol was okay. Like, I now understand, after actually playing it, what its role is within the 40K offering. And what its role is this, I think. You are new to 40K. We're going to walk you through a simplified version of this. I'm not saying dumbed down, because it is not dumbed down. It still requires quite a bit of coordination. But we're not going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at you.
Yeah.
You just have a little bit of taste here of what this army is. If I were getting into a new army, that might be an approach. As a more experienced gamer now, I don't think I need that launching point. Are all the armies balanced against each other? I mean, ostensibly, sure. Will we see Combat Patrol events? We very well may.
Yeah.
I don't think I will participate in those. I think I'll just play actual 40K.
Yeah.
But I'd like to play 40K kind of at the 1,000 point and above level.
Yeah.
I think the 500 point level was great for a learning, I'm trying to get through this, but man, those Marines with that Oath of Moment were just obliterating units. And I ended up making a pretty good game of it with Sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
that was I kept looking over, and you guys had 3 models.
There were not very many things left on the table by the end, but it was like, oh, I don't have one like that. So I was like, oh, okay, this makes a huge difference. Yeah. And so
that's interesting. I hear what you're saying, and I think that it is a more true introduction version of the game now compared to, say, Kill Team into 40K has ever been.
Yeah.
Because you are using the exact same core mechanics. You still have all the phases are the same. The units are the same as far as stats and things like that go. Abilities are toned down or adjusted a little bit, mostly, I think, from a balance standpoint and a little bit of the complexity.
Which makes a whole lot more sense to me why Leviathan is packaged the way it is now. It's very smart. It's very smart on Games Workshop's part. This is truly, I heard Jeff and other guys on Discord talking about, oh, well, Leviathan's really towards the already established gamers, and the new starter boxes are, right. I think it's a great introduction set for new players.
Yeah.
It is not quite to the level of, say, Battle for McCrag, where it was like, okay, this is how you move your guys. Play this game where you're just moving your guys across the table. It's not quite to that, but there's a lot of meat there. But it is definitely meant to be the introduction to 40K, and then open your horizons to the more complicated.
And the fact that it came with a Combat Patrol of each of those 2 factions, and then some additional minis on top of that to expand your forces as you get more familiar, comfortable, etc., with the full rule set in larger games.
Yeah. So Combat Patrol, I'm not giving it a thumbs down. I'm just saying not for me. I think it's great. It's just not for me. I think full 40K is for me. I just gotta. There's a steep little learning curve there. I got to get over, and I'm going to play the same army over and over to get over it. So that was. I've wandered on enough, but that was my games played. Let's go to you, and then we'll jump to our guests real quick.
Yeah, sounds great. So I did 2 games. One, I pulled the Sharkadons off the shelf and took them for a test drive. So
Yeah, you did.
played a game of 40K with Jody of all. Even
What?
Jody's playing 40K again. Like,
Unbelievable.
so Jody came over for my birthday event, and
He seemed kind of pessimistic, like about the whole thing.
I think
from
he
the
was
get-go.
wary of the approach, but it was interesting playing the game with him and him like asking questions about how a rule changed or seeing how something interacted and him be like, oh, okay, like I really like that change. Like it
makes sense.
It takes the gaminess out of the game. Like you're playing the game and not the rules of the game now. Like,
Right.
So it was way more immersive for him and things like that, which I think all good changes. And like the questions that he had, and I could see the reason why he was asking that and for how it's the game has changed to incorporate those. Just it makes it I don't know, a more fluid experience is the best way to explain it. So we had a really fun game. It was 500 points, Corn Demons against Sharkadons, so two very kind of melee focused armies. We played combat patrol missions. We were using combat patrol lists, but it was just small games.
The missions are great. Like, actually, I will say that the combat patrol missions are pretty cool.
Yeah. So if you're ever doing
A smaller game,
Smaller
even
game,
a 1,000-point
yeah.
game could
Yeah.
use those missions.
absolutely, yeah. Super fun mission. Demons had a ton of flavor. They have this whole like shadow mechanic. So as you take possession of objectives in the game, you get more influence and it brings demons back, and it's negatives to battle shock and things like that. So just really kind of thematic of this demonic incursion occurring. So on the points, Jody was doing really well on objectives and the points and taking that over. And on the killing side, the Sharks were doing their job really well. So it ended up being a kind of lopsided but really fun and balanced game in the same way, and that like he was crushing it on points, but I was about to table him, so then I would have had 2 turns to match the points that he
If
had.
his dogs didn't come back.
Yeah, yeah, which was they're tying up one character, but I had my other units.
Right.
Hand flamers, really good. I was able
Flamers
to.
in general are really good in this version.
Yeah, especially because they got to bump up to a 12-inch range instead of like the 8-inch or a template range of what they used to be. So it was interesting that I could overwatch with a hand flamer off of a deep strike because that's a movement, and then I could overwatch again when they charged in. So I actually got to fire my flamer twice and ended up taking out half his bloodletters of a big unit. So
Flamers in Overwatch.
yeah, it was amazing.
Are, you got your chocolate and my peanut butter. They are amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, super fun game, and it was just great to play a game of 40K with Jody again. And
It was good to see him.
yeah, had
Brian.
a great time, and yeah, looking forward to. I think they're also all very excited to play more 40K and see.
What else did you do?
I also did a teaching game of Aeronautica. So Jody, Craig, and Brian had all not played Aeronautica, so I walked them through
Through our perfectly timed coverage of Aeronautica Imperialis.
Now we're getting all the sales after the fact.
That's probably
Yeah.
true.
The
They were all like, "This is very interesting."
Yeah, which is a fun. So I did a dogfight, which we alluded to. We didn't allude to. We said in the episode, like it is not the most fun way to play the game, but it is the best way to learn the mechanics at the same time. So took them through a dogfight. We did a 2-on-2 team game, so I could just walk them through it. And then every opportunity that there was, it'd be like, in a mission, this could happen, and so I was really able to kind of illustrate the points of how something more interesting than a dogfight would happen. For those other missions, just because there's so much more depth to that game when you're not playing a dogfight.
100%.
All three of them really liked the game and got what it did, and it's a nice, simple, fun.
And then we're
fun
like,
game,
and we can't buy it.
if you're I
think Brian already has like everything.
Brian already has all of his Sons of Horus, but the interesting thing now is he's thinking about selling those because he's doing World Eaters, of course, for all of his upcoming Legions Imperialis stuff. So he's
Legion Imperialis.
and Jody's
timing on this.
likely to jump in for Legion Imperialis
Of
as well.
course he
So
is.
you got to have Blaine's.
All right. Well, Neris, how many games of 10th edition have you played so far?
I have only played 2.
Okay.
And both went very interesting to me.
How so? What was interesting? What was the game? What were you playing, and what was interesting about it for you?
So both of them were very much learning games, basically slimmed down missions to the point where it's just capture and hold objectives.
Smart.
Both of them was playing Flesh Terrors. First one was against Eldar. in an RE group, and their characters were hitting really hard, but they're struggling against me being able to do stuff like throw my cursors at the beginning of the game on top of a building that's just taller than they had the can't shoot me bubble from Phobos Librarian.
Gotcha.
So no one could shoot up into the building.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting.
So they're cute. My buddy was struggling with that, but then I ran my Outriders into his witches, and with Outriders, you kind of charge in and fall back and charge back in again. Can't do that against witches. You will lose your Outriders.
All right.
Yeah, learned that one the hard way.
So 2 games so far of 10th edition. Takeaways, like, are you enjoying it so far? Is it scratching any itches you didn't have, or you're not sure yet?
It is definitely scratching itches that I knew I had.
Okay.
But I am surprised at how much it's making me want to run more and more heavily melee armies.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. That seems to be the opposite of what I've heard. Just big picture from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Combat being so much more specific on who can get engaged in base-to-base contact. Now you don't have that 2 inches of the guy who's in base-to-base contact.
Yeah.
And just
I like it that rule is much cleaner.
I do like that. Yes, it makes it much easier to calculate and just figure out at a quick glance who's in. But also, there's so much less AP in melee. So things like power armor tend to hold up pretty well in melee. Like
force weapons do pretty good though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one interesting rule that our group, a couple people in our group struggled with initially was in the ruins rules. They thought after reading it that like tanks and vehicles could not move into ruins. And I and I have a criticism here too. Where that rule is actually mentioned is kind of a last sentence in a following paragraph, as is typical of Games Workshop rule writing. You got, like, there's times where I will read the last sentence first because there's always
that's where those
this
gems
is all
are.
like this except for this little thing. You know, it's like, okay. I understand why the rules are written in the order that they are written in. It is to walk somebody who is new to the game through each phase of this is how it rolls out.
Yep.
As a reference document or a reference book, it is horribly difficult to find the rule you are looking for.
Yeah,
they
agreed.
seem to be kind of scattered all over in sidebars. It's arguably one of the roughest walkthroughs of the rules I think I've seen, and I'm not quite sure. I'm hoping maybe there's like another iteration at some point and I don't know what the aversion to a glossary is with Games Workshop. There's sort of one in the back, but it's like every word I tried to look up was not listed in the glossary. So I was just like, okay. So I do spend a lot of time flipping back and forth. Now, as I become more familiar with the rules, I will have to look at the document less, but boy, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I'm not a big fan of the way the rules are laid out.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, so rare criticism from Carl Tuttle there.
I have found my best friend is using the PDF and Control F.
Yep. That's we talked about that. It's actually easier to search through the PDF than it is to actually have a printout of the rules. So.
Yeah, my first game, I was using my iPad for the rulebook and was just doing a search. Anytime there's a question, hey, how does that thing work? I'm doing a search because I'm going to find it way faster than the rulebook.
Hank, how many games have you played so far?
I think about half a dozen.
Whoa. Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah, nice.
So it's a solid amount.
Yeah, I played so many games during 8th edition. I played like between 3 and a dozen games a month, depending on local events.
I would say I played more 8th edition than any previous edition. And I played a lot of 7th edition up until a point, but I agree with you. Like I played a lot of 8th edition. So you've played already 6 games of 10th. And are you always playing the same army or are you swapping out?
Currently, I'm just playing my orcs. I'm a slow hobbyist, and I definitely aspire to always have a painted army. And that's one of those things, like once you achieve that, and it's no small burden getting into the hobby, but once you have a painted army, it is this high you chase forever. And as rules change and you have to add runt herds into your Gretchen, you're always like, I got to get this stuff painted.
Agreed.
So I have a sister's army that I've been slowly building, because much like you, I was like, when it's in plastic, I'm on board. And I started saying that in 2008. I'm like, they're going to do plastic. I'll be on board.
Yep.
So all these years later, but as it keeps happening, because I'm a slow painter, I just keep playing orcs, because by the time I get orcs on board, rules change. I'm like, well, now I got to paint some of this.
Well, and listen, you chose an army, orcs. Like the first army I fully painted was Tyranids, and it nearly broke me.
Yeah.
Because it was just a lot of models. And orcs are even more detailed than Tyranids.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, those Sisters of Battle models are way detailed. So, yes, I have a very large Sisters of Battle army, beautifully primed. And someday, but I felt this obligation, because I had always said, if it comes out in plastic, I'm doing it. And I do love the army and the look of it. So
how they play is really cool too. Having played against Craig and then seeing Craig play against
his
Sky.
are beautiful.
Yeah, now that you got to see them in person,
Yeah.
they're gorgeous. But just mechanically, like how they play like a very different army, but they're really thematic, and I love how they come to life on the tables.
I did watch their game for a while. It was really interesting. So what was the last game you played? What army did you play against, Hank?
Yeah, so just yesterday I played a game. So my first few games, like Neris, were like just figuring out the edition games, and slowly, like very first one is that basic.
Those don't count. Those are all like Steve.
And I just include any data sheet that I felt like. It was a cool first game. I got to see Angron die 3 times because he just kept coming back. We kind of fudged some of the dice rolling later in the game to make sure he could come back. Gasgul got to kill him twice. It was awesome. But then, like my last couple of games, I live in Phoenix, and we have a league that runs every season. Sorry. So there's 4. We're now starting the summer league.
That's kind of cool.
And so I played my first 2 games of that. And so the one I played just yesterday, up at the Imperial Outpost in Glendale, it was against another orc player. And I actually realized that, other than one time when I was teaching a guy how to play the game, period, I hadn't played orcs against another orc player, and I think years. Again, the caveat being, I played a lot of 8th, did not play a lot of 9th. That's not a failure of 9th. That's just life.
And it was a strange time. I think we're all in the same boat.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was cool to play orcs. And like right now, this is a competitive league, so that means you get a lot more. When you play a mirror match, you're probably more likely to run into similar things, which is what I expected. Right now, it's trucks. Everyone's high on trucks. They're 50 points. They do a lot of cool stuff. People like trucks. This guy had 1 truck. He had a gargantuan squigoth that took up the points of every other truck that you could include. And it was just beautifully painted. His whole army has got this like cell shaded look. He's much like me. Some of the stuff isn't painted because he's adding new units. How our league does it is, at the end of the season, if your army is battle ready, they then add the battle ready points to all your games for the season.
Dude, that is a great idea.
So it's escalation and a competitive league kind of built into one. That's a really cool.
Couple things here that Hank has hit on that I love. One, seasonal, like every 4 seasons we do a different league. That's a really cool idea. 2, the points at the end, which kind of then celebrate your progress.
Yeah. Yep.
That is a freaking cool idea. Hank, let me ask you this. Is there any season that there are particularly fewer players, especially in Arizona where it gets particularly warm? Are there any seasons where there are more or fewer players?
I wish I could answer that. I don't know. I would actually expect there to be more players in the summer because
you're indoors.
Because you're indoors, yeah. It's the opposite for us as it is in a lot of the rest of the country and the world, where in the winter you're inside. We're outside doing everything because it's much like Southern California, or any part of California near the coast. For the summer, I work in construction. I have to work at 4:30 in the morning because we have to get done before it gets. So today was 114. I got done at 12:30. It was still 108.
Yeah.
So we stay indoors, and so I wouldn't be surprised. But I didn't, like I said, I just didn't play enough in the 9th edition to get an idea of that. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was actually winter and summer got the most, because
makes sense.
As close as we are to Vegas, the Las Vegas Open is a big thing in this community. A lot of people go to it, and having a full season to get your list worked out for LVO,
sure,
That would be my expectation.
Sure.
But that's kind of just
love the
speculation.
idea. Love the idea of a seasonal thing. Like that is so cool.
Yeah, whether it's a
Because it has a limited end. It's like
Yep.
any campaign,
was-
right?
Yeah.
Like if there's hey, we have till this time, that's it. Like,
Whether if you do a league or a campaign, here's your seasonal campaign.
That's smart.
Which is a long campaign, but
I mean, it's
but
3
for a
months,
league. Yeah.
right? That's smart. That's very
And-
cool.
And it's partnered with local stores. So the local stores say they want to participate. Then they have an arbitrator at each store who helps coordinate the collection of the dues, your
Yeah.
dues. And then how it works is each store has its own tournament as like a semifinal. And then those qualify for the league finals, which rotates from the member stores. And these are all small businesses, mom and pop stores.
That's right.
And they're in on this. And
That's
it's really
smart.
cool. They've been doing it for years. They have a
That's
trophy, there's a skull, and they write the winner's name on it. It's got the Arizona flag. If you've never seen the Arizona flag, it's a great flag. There's a lot of things to dislike about our state, but our flag is awesome. It's painted that way.
That's
So
Nice.
it's a great thing. It's a great
That's
community.
smart because it's tied to all the local.
Which I'm
game
now
stores
remembering
together.
at Don talk about all the
Yeah.
the rotating things at different stores that were there was like 3 stores in the local area where he was. I think it was in Prescott, right? But
Yeah.
but there was a couple stores that were tied into something similar like that. So that's
That's
cool.
a great idea.
Well
Wow.
done for
Very
the
cool.
Arizona community. That's
Very cool. Well, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back. We'll kick off the actual meat of the show, the Warrior Lodge. So we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. Let's get into the Warrior Lodge.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here today.
That's why we're here. All right. So again, moderated discussion. I'm going to start with the first question that I have here, which is, there's been multiple ways to play 40K in the new edition. We talked a little bit about that earlier today. Boarding actions, combat patrol, standard missions, Leviathan style missions. Which of these appeals to you the most and why? And let's start that discussion. I'll go directly to Hank for the first piece. Hank, of these, which one appeals to you the most and why?
I'm definitely gonna go with the Leviathan style missions. I'm primarily playing a lot of competitive 40K because
Sounds like it.
It's so easy. It's such an easy way to get into the hobby as long as you have a community that puts on these tournaments. And I mean, like my story said, I started at a beginner's tournament, so it's just fundamental to my enjoyment of the game is meeting up with people in a place and playing a bunch of games in a day. But those missions are great because in 8th edition, I played a lot of the Maelstrom, and I loved Maelstrom. And then eventually started going to more tournaments where we played a lot of the ITC, because I live in the West Coast, the ITC format missions. But whenever I would go back to my home store at that time, I played a lot of Maelstrom, which I really enjoyed. But Maelstrom had its issues, and one of the big things they figured out was that they don't need to tell me what objective to run onto. It's by removing that alone and just making the cool little missions more. But the fact that I never got to play Tempest of War, because again, I just didn't play enough 9th edition, so I mostly just played the tournament missions or crusade missions. The Leviathan style missions, taking those secondaries from the 9th edition and the tournament style secondaries and stuff, but making those the cards you draw is exactly what I want. I'm playing more competitively, so I want still strong missions that make a skill expression a thing.
Sure.
But getting to draw those cards and it changing my game plan from game to game, makes each game feel different in ways where it's like suddenly it's like, okay, I got to keep Storm Boys in reserve until I have to bring them on the table, because I might draw behind enemy lines in turn 3, and if I can just drop down some Storm Boys, it's so easy. And stuff like that is cool. But of course, if I draw behind enemy lines early, I'll be like, okay, my Storm Boys are free to come on because I no longer have to save them for that eventuality. And so that's the big thing. I do want to throw out, like, I haven't played any of the boarding actions. Still really want to.
Yeah.
It looks so cool. But primarily, I'm really enjoying the Leviathan style missions, and I can't wait to see them iterate on this when the next one in a year. But I don't think I'm going to get tired of it. The ability to change up the card draw and stuff it's such a cool way to play, and for it to be well made. It's
Gotcha.
awesome.
Gotcha. What about you, Josh?
Well, I actually had a question for Hank there. Are you primarily playing with the, it sounds like you're using the tactical variant versus the fixed for the secondaries on there. And then second question I had is, if you are doing the tactical, how are you finding the single, using a command point in order to be able to redraw a single one? Like, have you had those turns where you get the flop of it's like 3 secondaries that you just can't do much with, and then you're limited by a single command point to get rid of one?
Yeah, so I played entirely tactical, and that's the way I built my list with orcs is I just don't think the orcs are terribly good at just killing one single thing. And also some of it's like my orcs, I pick a bunch of vehicles, so I had an opponent play fixed against me because he can bring it down,
Sure,
or just get a bunch of points. Like, it's just, he knows he's going to get 20, because even if I play very well, he's going to kill a bunch of trucks. But so I've been playing tactical, and that's the way to build the list, which means you need a lot of units that can do stuff. Like I talked about Storm Boys. 5 Storm Boys don't kill much on their own, but it's very hard to screen out 5 models, so they get to do objectives well. As for the thing, so the card draw, I haven't had a time yet where I get an objective I just don't think I can do. And I like, even yesterday, I thought I did that. I drew the one that's you have to get on the objective in your opponent's deployment zone, and it's like, oh man, that's hard. But then I was like, oh, Storm Boys. I dropped 2 Storm Boys units down. 1 failed the charge. 1 won the charge, killed some Gretchen, took the objective. And so I haven't had that happen yet. The fact that you get your command point and then can do that does mean that in the worst case scenario, you can use that stratagem, but you're only allowed to use it once per game.
Right.
So to me, it's like, if you're going to do tactical, it really behooves you to make sure that you can do them all. And because there's only a couple off the top of my head, Bring It Down and Assassinate are the only ones I know that rely on your opponent's list to be scoreable. So other than that, then it's on, in my mind, I guess it's on you to make sure your list can do them. If your list can't do, if there's several objectives that you know, if you draw it, might be dead to you, then you maybe shouldn't do tactical, or you should change your list to take advantage of it.
Interesting.
Better. That's me.
It's a cool feature though, that you can spin that command point to remove it. It's very smart.
I just, in my first game of that style with Brian, he had a turn where all 3 that flopped, he's like, that's not looking good.
Interesting.
And the previous iterations of this, whether it was Maelstrom or I forget what 9th was called, the
Tempest of War.
Tempest of War, that's the one. They had mechanics built in where I don't remember it costing command points, but you could wipe a single card or a whole hand if you wanted to and redraw, but it would be at the end of your turn, so you might not score anything this turn, but now you have 3 fresh options for the next turn. This one I'm just curious because you're getting a single card.
In retrospect, 9th could have used spending more command points on stuff like that, right? What about you, Josh? What type of play is really appealing to you?
Similar to what Hank said, the 2 things that are really most appealing to me at the moment are Leviathan using tactical objectives. Like, I really like that flexibility. It's less random than the true Drunken Commander was back when Maelstrom first came out, where it's not numbered objectives. It's not like you need objective 2, now you need objective 6, and it's on the complete opposite side that you just
left that one.
It's like, what? Come on, we were just there. The balance and how it works out, really appealing. I've only played a single game of that so far with tactical objectives. Super fun. Really enjoyed that. And the other thing I'm very excited for are more boarding action games.
Yeah.
Have not played boarding action in 10th yet, but with a few games of that I played in 9th, and how much of that was already kind of a prelude to what 10th had to offer, minus the index card reset. But as far as mechanically how those games work, very excited. Like how the lists are built, like how the missions play, and really like how it changes your engagement with the board itself.
Neris, any thoughts there on what style of play really appeals to you?
I'm again also leaning heavily towards Leviathan style missions.
Yeah.
Most of my gameplay is in-store gameplay once every couple weeks, as I manage to organize wargaming nights there.
Sure.
So being able to just have cards that we pull from, now we know where our mission is, now we know what we're doing, now we know where our objectives are, makes it pretty quick to actually get things going.
Yeah.
I'd like to do more boarding action, but no one in my store actually has played it, let alone has the rules for it on hand. So
yeah, the rules are free to download, so that's a great part about it. It seems like it's inspired by the old Zone Mortalis
Yes, very much.
thing, which was my favorite way to play 7th edition at that point. So, I'm very much about boarding actions. But yes, I think, look, this isn't a controversial question. Like everybody seems to be landing on Leviathan with the, tactical play. I couldn't agree more.
It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Has anybody of the group here, has anybody encountered gambits and actually seen like a big shift of the game changing with gambits? Just out of curiosity.
I have not used them yet.
No, I had an opponent who was so far ahead, he thought about doing it just because why not? But no, it hasn't come up relevant yet. And it's one of those things that I do think when eventually a gambit happens and somebody wins a game because of the gambit, it's going to be another one of those people are going to see, be like, yeah, I saw it happen, and they were nowhere near the store. That kind of thing is what I expect to happen with gambits. The biggest thing is I think it'll give somebody who would have just quit the game being like, well, let's see if I can do this stupid objective.
For the F1 fans, that's like Max Verstappen being 24 seconds ahead in the race and saying, hey, I'm going to pull in and get this extra point. No, don't do that, Max. Why do you think I got 24 seconds ahead? Put me on faster tires.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. I think there's a lot of opportunity. In retrospect, coming up with this question, I probably should have asked this question after people had more experience playing more games. So maybe that's a question I'll ask again in a future episode too. Like, has that changed your opinion?
Sure, yeah.
Moving on to the next one though, Games Workshop just recently, and this may not impact some of you, but I think it kind of impacts the hobby as a whole. Games Workshop recently announced the retirement and or deprecation of many of the Marine models, including land speeders and a few others. Scouts, like quite
a couple staples.
Yeah. I mean, I know people who had entire scout armies off those scouts. What are your thoughts on this move? I mean, like clearly this is another step towards the retirement of the original Marines in favor of moving towards the Primaris Marines. I have said on this show, it's a 10-year plan to remove the old Marines and replace them with, quite frankly, better looking models.
You're right, yeah.
For the most part. There's a few in there that I'm like, I don't like this unit. Just give me jump pack, guys. Jump pack Primaris.
Give me jump packs.
Give me jump pack Primaris. What are your thoughts on this? And Neris, let's start with you because you just showed me you're working on Marines right now on Flesh Terrors. Like, does this have any impact to you, or what are your thoughts on the deprecation of these old models?
So I'm both annoyed and glad that they're doing it because a lot of these old models do need to be replaced or discarded. They're old, hard to put together, and sometimes absurdly fragile.
Yeah.
At the same time, I've now been reduced from 4 units I can take with Gabriel Seth to 2.
Mm.
And I'm struggling to obtain either one of them.
Yeah.
Because I'm down to Vanguard Veterans and Tactical Marines. And,
Well, let's talk after the show. I might have some of those units sitting around.
Yeah. My entire army until now has been almost entirely Primaris.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not very heavily impacted by this, but I know my friend who's basically got the same army but entirely Firstborn is like, I need half a new army.
Yeah. And again, I think the evolution of, well, listen, I'll save my point till I'll save my point because I'm asking you guys. Josh, you are also a Marine player.
Yeah.
How has this impacted you, if all?
And I'm very much on the opposite side of the spectrum there, in that I have an entire Firstborn army compared to Primaris, so I've been slowly Primarisizing my Sharkadons to get them more relevant and play with the new models and new toys and things like that, knowing that everything's going to be relegated to Legends.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that Legends are available, so all the models are still out there and they have rules. You won't be able to buy them much longer, but they will have rules good for the edition. We'll see what comes next edition, next codex, etc. I have a feeling they're going to be, gone at that point.
At a certain point.
At some point, they're not going to be supported anymore. And they've already said that Legends aren't going to get updates through the rest of this edition. So this is it. A couple things I could see them taking another pass at it, like halfway through, depending on the length of the edition, how long in the tooth it gets. Hey, somebody go take a look at this and maybe And they probably won't touch the indexes, the data sheets, whatever, but they might do a little points adjustment or something like that, maybe. But it's they're not going to
go all out.
Definitely pay that much attention to it compared to the rest of the competitive scene for that.
Yeah.
The few things that I'm actually really sad about are some of the Forge World character models that are going out. Like
me too.
Tyros the Red Wake, who's my Sharkadon's chapter master. I have the model, so I've already got it. That's great. He doesn't even have an index card anymore. Like he doesn't have rules. They put up that PDF last week that's like, this guy counts as this. So it's like my chapter master with all of his cool relic weapons and things like that just counts as a Terminator captain now.
Yeah.
I was like, that for me, that's kind of a feel bad moment, and that's
I've Lord Zufor too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's what I get for playing Forge World characters, and he's the only special character that I have owned or played with in probably 5 editions.
Yeah,
it's because I'd rather make my own characters and play with special characters. That's just how I prefer to play the game. But he's always been the model that he's the only official Carcharodon model that.
Did you kind of build the army based on him as the point lead for it,
or thematically, yes, but not necessarily mechanically.
That's what I mean.
More lists than not that I played with them did not include him.
Right, but he inspired you to go this route.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of the model and just the lore behind them. Reading Bedab War and all the lore in there, and like it's just such a cool chapter for me.
For sure.
They also thematically, like, they have a ton of scouts. They have scouts and scout speeders, and it's just how the chapter's built. So I have a lot of these models already that, knowing that the models are being discontinued, which means the rules are also going to be discontinued for future, it's just more fuel for me needing to primaricize this army or move on to something else. I've got all the Primaris stuff already purchased, so for me, it's been good motivation of actually getting this stuff built and painted and playing with it. And to your point, like, a lot of the new models I do think look better. Like, there's this better aesthetic, there's better scale to it.
Yeah.
The new speeders I like more than the old land speeders. Now we have the Hammer Strike and the Talon and I'm blanking on the names of what the actual speeder chassis is called. But
gee, how can you? I mean, the Marine index card thing is only 8 inches thick.
There's a handful of things in there. But Marines have so many toys that I'm not sad to see some of the older toys being retired to make room for those new things to really
You raise an interesting point there. Marines have so many toys. I mean, that's why I made an Ultramarines army and played them.
Yeah.
Back before people were playing Ultramarines army, it was the time where you'd go to the Adepticon. People were like, oh my God, an actual Ultramarines army.
Right, yeah.
But the reason I got into them was like, oh, they have so many toys. I just want to play with more toys. And boy, when you saw those index cards come out and you see the thickness of the Marine index card stack compared to every other, it really does.
They're at least 3 times the next.
I mean, look, and a third of it at least is dedicated to different lieutenants. And listen, Hank, we know you're an orc player, and so this doesn't really have much impact on you, nor do we really care what your opinion is on Marines since you're an orc player.
Well, actually, it's a contrasted thing. Not because I foresaw the future, but the rapid release of Primaris, I stopped collecting Space Marines.
Interesting.
I have a Blood Angel army.
All right, you're back in.
Yeah, but I stopped collecting them, and I'm like, I didn't even buy the 9th edition Codex. I'm actually thinking about taking the pictures to put up a post to sell most of the stuff that's decently painting, keeping my older stuff as just a nostalgia trip because it wouldn't be worth much to anyone anyways.
Yeah.
And one of those reasons is not so much because I foresaw this. Maybe if I did, it's only because I listened to the show and heard about the 10-year plan. But instead, it was just with the rapid release of Primaris stuff, it was so hard to keep up. And again, as an orc player, I am fortunate that there's somebody in that design studio that loves orcs. So every 3 years, we get a bunch of new stuff, which is cool.
There's a bunch of guys there that like orcs.
Yeah. And so, like, some factions, I feel for them. They might get one thing when their codex rolls around, but as orcs, we get it. That's enough for me. The release at which Space Marines get stuff, at some point, I just decide, I'm like, I can't keep up with this. So maybe in the future, I told myself this in the past. I was like, maybe in the future, when that range is fleshed out, and if they stop making new Marines every 6 months, maybe I would start a new Marine army. But I chose to get off that wagon because it was too much. And
Hank makes a very interesting point about the pace at which Marine stuff gets released. Like, that's actually a really, really interesting point. And I won't get into it until they kind of settle the range. I don't know that Marines ever settle.
I have a feeling, sorry to interrupt here, but with their new codex coming out in the next few months, like we know the Marine Codex is coming out in fall, and we know Primaris Scouts already exist because Black Templars have already had them.
Yeah.
Like I think some of these models that are being relegated are going to see a release in the next couple months, even like this year when that new codex comes out. They're always going to support a new Marine Codex with a couple new bottles or something.
Absolutely.
Like that. So
it's top seller.
Yeah,
I mean, it
right.
shows. I mean, Chaos should be, but okay. Well, yeah, I think I think Hank raised some really interesting points, especially for an orc player. Like, why he doesn't get into it. It makes a lot of sense, though.
Yep,
like
absolutely.
that's very, very. I'd never looked at it that way before. One of the interesting things over the course of 8th, 9th, and now 10th edition is the advancement of the Warhammer 40K timeline. Again, we don't really care what Hank thinks here because he's a tournament player. I'm joking, Hank. I'm glad you could listen to me give you a hard time. We have now seen the return of multiple loyalist Primarchs, as well as a few traitor Primarchs, and the stories behind their return. This used to be kind of a situation where the timeline never advanced.
Right.
It was stuck at 1 minute to midnight.
Yep.
Now they've moved it to about 5 seconds to midnight. And how can we increment those seconds? How do you feel about them? So this is really a two-part question. Like, how do you feel about them advancing the timeline in general? And considering that Games Workshop is now moving the timeline forward, what would you like to see happen in kind of the next phase of the timeline? And so taking all that into account, let's start with Hank because I gave him a hard time. Hank, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I've definitely, I don't want to say I was. I still am of the opinion that like it was a setting to me, and I didn't need a storyline or a plot. I as a kid, read history textbooks, and that is still my favorite way to read fluff, and I use fluff because I just like it. Just dense information. I don't need characters doing stuff they can run off. Apologize if you hear my kids; they're wonderful.
You're fine.
And so that was always my thing. That's it. And I was actually a little pessimistic about moving the story forward. Because I was not optimistic I would enjoy. I knew what I liked. I wasn't sure. As things have come along and they've done stuff, I've discovered that it hasn't hurt my still enjoyment of the setting. I like the fact that it's the war, and that's the thing I want to focus on. When they do stuff that's about a MacGuffin, it then loses my interest a little bit. I just like the settings, which is also why I like any of the stuff from the Forge World did.
Give me an example of what you mean by a MacGuffin and how you lose interest in that.
Yeah, so when I just like the idea that it's a massive war. There's billions of people being sent onto this planet to fight, and like the objectives are obtuse at times because that's like a real part of the setting. When I don't want to spoil anything because most of it I haven't read, so I won't talk about the Arcs of Omen and where that went. But like I think I could do Vigilus. Hopefully people, if they care about the fluff and Vigilus, have read it. Something about like the Inside the Storm, that was just a cool piece of world building. The Dust Storm, it's like, well, it's actually, there's a bunch of Fallen in there, and there was a weapon that I believe was able to damage the Vengeful Spirit. I think that's what happened. And stuff like that, where it's like, instead of a war being fought just for the conquest or the ability to fight or to decimate opponents because you're fighting a war on a galactic scale, it was like, no, we need this weapon or this artifact or this ancient thing that's what we need. And to me, that's probably better storytelling than but like I was a guy that followed the week by week YouTube channel that did the World War I 100 years later. Just hearing about the scale of stuff is what interests me. So when it comes to the storyline, that's my big. I like the setting.
Gotcha.
So, but if I had to ask, like, what do I want to see? I want them to give me a battle zone in the Imperium Nihilus, and I want to know how the Imperium on that side is surviving, and if it's not, and I want to see it crumble and fall. And I would love like war zone stories in that area, in like an individual area, whether they prosper or they collapse. That's stuff I would really, really like to see.
And you have some chapters that are actually stuck on that side, so it would be very, very, very interesting to see. Neris, what about you? What do you think about them advancing the timeline? But what also would you like to see?
I So I got into this at the beginning of 8th edition, so I wasn't even aware the timeline was standing
static?
still
Yeah.
until now. Um, so
So to you, actually, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Neris, that's a really good point. So to you, like, it's always been advancing.
yeah, the entire time I've been in it.
Interesting. I didn't even consider that. Like 8th edition feels still so recent to me, but it really is quite a while ago. Neris, what would you like to see them expand on then in the next kind of move forward? Anything in particular?
Again, I'm really curious about the Imperium Nihilus as well.
Yeah.
As it's just a vast, it's basically a large open area of story that they have largely seemed to left alone to have left alone.
That's a good point.
I honestly haven't followed a lot of the newer stories and stuff because they have been coming out for as long as I've been in the hobby. So I'm still trying to catch up on all the early stuff.
Oh, I can see why you would be overwhelmed by it. As I've said before, I remember when I first got in the hobby, I read all the omnibuses, and then I was like, there's nothing else to read.
You're caught up.
I finally got to Gaunt's Ghost because I was like, I don't want to read about just normal soldiers. And then I was like, oh, I should have read this first. This is amazing. But now, like you, I can't keep up. I'm a prolific reader of this stuff, and I can't keep up. There's so much out there. It's incredible.
Yeah, there's days I'll just literally spend reading, oh, this is neat facts about this chapter or this faction, and to just try to get some more of the information in me, because there's just so much information that just keeping up with the main story is difficult.
Neris is so lucky to be born in such times, to be a man born or a woman born in these times. You're set. You got so much
golden age of gaming.
What about you, Josh? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so I'm very excited to see the timeline change because I've been playing since 32 years ago or so.
Longer than I have
since 2nd edition.
Yeah. So
the timeline has changed quite a bit, and they have advanced, and it is nice because it has been that whatever hour to midnight kind of timeline for so long. It's just been this looming presence that it still hasn't hit yet, but we're getting closer and closer and closer. And it feels like the stakes are escalating and more things are happening. And that's really interesting. So I like seeing that. It's not only just a setting, which I agree with Hank, like it's a great setting and that frames that really well. But after playing in that setting for 32 years, like I enjoy seeing how the story is escalating a little bit here and conflicts are like having sway in different areas. And having read, especially The Lion, the Lion book. I'm blanking on the exact name.
I can't remember the title of the latest one that really charts his return.
Right. Yeah. So and that paints a really cool picture on. I think that is in the Nihilist sector, which there's not a lot of. I think Spears of the Emperor and the Lion book are the only two that I can think of, or that I have read myself. But paint a really interesting picture on what that side of the galaxy is looking like,
which is a wreck.
Yeah, and there's just chaos and raiders and everything's rampant and everybody's a mess and there's just no communication. There's no like warp beacon communication things happening, like system to system. Like it's just everything's kind of controlled by pirates and even in the Lion, they're like and Marines have kind of turned to piracy in order to just survive because there's 2 Marines from a chapter here and there's a planet that they hooked up with a planetary governor and like they're like forming their own militias and things like that. It's just kind of this haphazard chaotic mess, which I think is really interesting and exciting. So that's been cool. And then what I'd like to see, I think it's more of those big like strokes actually happening, whether it's we're killing off some of the old characters, more people moving over to Primaris, whatever it is. What I'm curious to see is how the non-Imperial side of things is handling this rift also. Like, how is the rift affecting the webway? Like, are Eldar still able to sneak across back and forth without any kind of interruption because they're not actually warp traveling, or what's going on there? Answering some of those questions, exploring some of that more, and then also just taking some of those bigger steps to advance the timeline. Like,
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Like, I think the Imperium Nihilus is ripe for great stories. You mentioned Spears of the Emperor, which was something I was going to talk about a little bit. I think they give a really great example of just how bad the situation is over there. I think it's, in hindsight, I think Hank hit on a point, which at first I was also very much like, don't move it forward. I love Forge Worlds, like the Imperial armor telling of stories there. I think it's more history type, like future history. Hank also alluded to, he reads a lot of history stuff. I felt like it's more grippy. I and I've said this before, I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here. One, I want them to move away from us following various characters.
Yep.
Like the galaxy is so massive. There is no reason that one person here or one person there needs to make that huge of a difference. And yes, okay, Pedro Cantor is the Primarch of the, Crimson Fists. Cool. I mean, now let's talk about another character. Like, it doesn't matter to me that, and I think they missed an opportunity to, as bad as this sounds, because I know people are attached to their various characters, to kill off a few characters and replace them with new ones.
Yep.
Like, that should be happening more than it is. Now, here comes the hypocrite in me. I want to see him bring Demon Fulgrim back. I want to see Fulgrim as a demon prince.
Yeah.
I think that it would be an amazing model.
I think it's coming.
And I hope so. Yeah. So, okay. Go ahead, Neris. You act like you got a comment you want to make there.
Yeah. Something I actually really specifically want to see is a story of a hive world on an Imperium Nihilus that has actually thrived now that they're no longer connected to the Imperium as a whole.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea, because some are probably doing so. And how are they doing it?
Planets that no longer have to pay that Imperial tithe, and they have all these resources they get to keep for themselves.
That's a good point.
Maybe they're going to thrive, and maybe.
I mean, think about how large our galaxy actually is. Like and it is such a hard concept to grip. And I've talked about Gav Thorpe writing the Mars series a while back, where they go out to like the edge of the galaxy. And it wasn't until like I read that series that I thought, oh, how massive this is. I've played role-playing games like Traveler and stuff.
Right,
and Traveler, you're just in a part of the galaxy too. Like, the galaxy is so big. And now half of it has been written half, cut off from us. There is got to be so much to discover on the other side of that. The other thing I really liked was the video they released where Rabute Gilliman is talking about, we're doing this crusade, and we've got the new Primaris Marines and blah, blah, blah. And then you realize he's really saying, none of this is working. We're all going downhill.
Right, yeah.
It's all a losing battle. I thought it was really well written.
The framing of that is such the Imperial
tagline, right? The Imperial line that you're saying, everything's great. No, it's not good. It's all rotten to the core.
The other interesting thing is how history is cyclical, right? So this has all happened before. Like, there was the
time of
strife, the Age of Darkness, all those things were right before unification happened, and compliance and all those things. Like, all these imperial systems, formerly not imperial, I guess at that point, but human systems had been separated, and then they had to go out and get reclaimed.
But this seems worse than ever, because chaos was not involved.
Kind of the same thing, but now it's going to be even harder for those independent factions to survive in that. So seeing one that is actually not only surviving but thriving, I think would be fascinating.
All right, last question, and this is a real quick one from me, and then Josh, you'll take over the next segment. But the Warhammer app. The app for building your 40K army. Are you using it, and what are your thoughts so far? Josh, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been using it a ton. I've really appreciated it for army building, because army building is so easy right now, especially having the app there, which just, add your units, add your points. You got your character, you got a couple things, and it'll tell you
if you're wrong.
If you're wrong, where your list is illegal. There are a couple small beefs I have with it, like one that you can't change the name of the app or the list that you're making, and you can't duplicate
once it's made, it's locked in.
Once you've made it, what I really wish, hopefully it's a very simple feature that they can add there. You make a list, you duplicate that list, and now you can use that as a basis. Like, if you're always going to use this as my core of this army, let me duplicate that, and then I can flavor to taste for this particular battle or whatever that you want to do.
I think I saw Neris nodding his head. Neris, anything to add there?
I think being able to do that would be helpful, especially since with how little I've actually got painted of my army, being able to duplicate. Yeah, these are all my painted models. Okay, what do I need to paint to finish this list?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. You use it for tracking your painting as well.
Yeah, if you got your core set of models, let me duplicate that list so that
I know what units to add.
Or let me change the name, after the fact. Something. So those are two very small things that I'm sure are going to be easy to do. I can say easy because I'm not a software programmer, so they're super simple to do. It'll probably be done next week.
Probably take an hour.
Yeah,
it'll take an hour coding. Hank.
I haven't actually been using much. Before it came out, I set up a spreadsheet to make army lists. I like how it outputs, which is really my only real critique with the app. The way it outputs lists, like I don't need to see the individual way the weapons are. Just tell me I have 9 power claws. Like I don't like the app. But because of I already made
fine.
something.
Yeah.
And I use a tablet to play, and I have my data cards on that because I print them to a page on a PDF, so it's easier to find the whole thing. I haven't used it a lot for gaming. It's a great reference tool, though, when I'm just sitting around at home wondering stuff. I'll look it up quick. My only concern is, because that's kind of how it worked at the beginning of 8th with that app, was it was an okay reference tool. But as codexes came out and each army started getting locked in, I'm afraid that'll happen again, and that means the app will get less and less useful if you have to unlock it with codex codes, because now nobody buys every codex anymore. There's so many, and they're not cheap. And so losing that functionality, if the app maintains that, then any other critique I have is just minor user interface things that I would wish were better.
I think 100% that's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because it's really good for that. But.
Yeah. I think as they move away from indexes, that will absolutely happen. And it may even be that you need to be a subscriber of Warhammer Plus to get access. I don't know. But that being the case, I've used it a lot lately. I really enjoy it for the list building aspect. I think there's some minor improvements that could happen to it, but it is far and away better than what they had previously. I think it's simplified. I'd like to be able to force a point list size too. Like, I want to build 750 point list, okay.
Yeah.
But now you just take 1,000 lists and then you just,
I've been making a lot of 1,500 point lists, which I'm building towards a 2,000 point list,
right,
and then just leaving 500 points out.
But I think also your point about copying and renaming would be a huge benefit too.
Yeah. Especially same thing. Like, you have your collection. Here's 1,000 points. I want to take this same 1,000 points that I have painted and make that a 1,500 point list. Let me just copy that and now add what units I want to.
It's super easy. To software development is super easy. I don't know why everybody doesn't do it.
It's like 3 lines of code. Let's go.
I know how magnets work.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely.
Exactly. All right. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and then Josh, you're going to lead the next segment, which is more discussion about various
10th edition
stuff.
Surprise.
All right. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back, and Josh, take it away.
Yeah, so I've got a couple questions here, and I'm going to start with Carl for this one here, just because we've been hearing from the rest of us a lot here, and we all want to hear what Carl has to say.
No, we don't.
There's a comment saying new edition, new army. That's especially been true of recent years here. Do you feel the current clean slate of Index Hammer makes it easier to approach a new army versus a codex that has been out for a couple of years and well established? And also, in addition to that, are you starting a new army right now or have plans for one in the near future?
Okay, so first of all, yes, I think it does make it a lot easier. In particular, and though I sounded like I was negative towards it earlier in the show, the combat patrol is such a great introduction for people. Like, it's a great core way of starting your army, and I think that for people, especially now, just getting into 40K, like, brilliant. And I think those combat patrol boxes are what the game needed a long time ago. So without a doubt, I think it's super easy to get in. I think it's super easy to do a new army at this point too. Am I going to do a new army? Well, sort of. I'm going back to an army. I even put up a poll earlier, that was, hey, of these armies, which one should I do? boy, after seeing those Tyranid models, I wish people would voted Tyranids, but somebody also raised a good point with Tyranids being kind of the focus right now. You're going to see a lot of Tyranid armies out there.
Yep.
So good point. Black Legion it is for
Paint
me.
that combat patrol of Tyranids and you're ready to go with the force.
But like everything in my household, if I have to do one, I have to do two because my wife gets involved in everything, which is awesome and a detriment and costly. Oh, I got a new gaming computer. She gets a new gaming computer, so it's like everything costs twice as much, but it's also twice the fun.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's me. I wholeheartedly think more than ever, and it could just be my lot in life and my place at the moment, but I'm like, yes, I want a new army for this edition.
Nice.
As much as I love Thousand Sons.
Neris, let's go with you next for same question. Let me know if you need me to repeat it. Otherwise, new edition, new army, and any plans for, does that make it easier? And any plans for something in the near future of another faction?
Yeah, I'm with Carl here on the cold combat patrols, making it really easy to start a new army. I'm technically not starting a new army this edition, although I haven't actually played my Flesh Tearers until this edition because 9th edition was during the pandemic. So, but overall, I think it's going to be a lot easier to get into a new army this edition, at least at this point in time, just with how things are right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you pick up the Leviathan box?
I did not.
Okay. I was curious with Leviathan out there and the default Marine combat patrol being components out of the Leviathan box. If you were to do combat patrol, are you doing that using Blood Angels, which Flesh Tearers not having their own combat patrol yet?
Yeah, so I actually have Blood Angels combat patrol. I actually got through the Discord because I'm currently not working, so I can only spend this much on Warhammer right now.
Me too. Me too. It's a good thing I spent it all years ago. I just go out to my garage.
So I actually have a Blood Angels combat patrol plus a couple Indominus boxes plus a couple other things that have been slowly trickling their way into my hands.
That's not too shabby.
Nice, perfect.
Secondary market's perfect for that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll tell you, Josh and I split that Leviathan box set, and I wanted the Tyranids, and again, I'm not playing Marines, but by God, I looked at them and I was like, oh man, I really love the look of these guys. They're so good.
They're good.
They're so good. Hank?
Yeah, Hank, let's bring it home here.
Yeah, I almost wanted to just offer a different voice to be a contrarian and be like, no, it was better the other, but like it's the index with it, I can make an argument that when a codex has been out for years, there's some structure in the community and online, and you can find a place to start. And especially since I'm offering more of a competitive voice here, like that kind of stuff can help somebody a lot. But it's really hard to really make that argument that how freeing it is right now would be worse than that. So it's even harder because of combat patrol. And I'm like Carl, I have absolutely no interest in it myself, but and I cannot in good faith argue that is not great for somebody to get into a new army or to get into the game.
Good for the game and the hobby, not necessarily good for you specifically.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be, and it could be. Like I've always wanted to paint Tau, but I don't know I want to collect a whole Tau army. Maybe at some point I pick up that $160 box, just paint that in a cool scheme, something wild that I probably wouldn't want to paint across 2,000 points, but it just looks cool.
Why do people always use Tau in that example? I've done it myself.
Because they're Tau.
Yeah.
I had a Tau army.
Because nobody wants to play a full army of Tau.
I eventually traded it all away for more orcs because I didn't know how to paint them. Yeah. Because there's just something about that look, which I love. I think it looks so good, and I just can't wrap my minds around how I would want to do it. So that's why it's my example, because it is an army I had and got rid of because of that issue.
No, fair.
But yeah, it's great. And for me, like I've been saying, I play orcs. I'm going to continue playing orcs. Once my orcs are in a good spot, I'm collecting my sisters, and I don't anticipate playing a new army. In a way, as an answer to a different question, like I think I'm going to get into Horus Heresy at some point because I miss older style rules. So the new edition made me finally look at that. So in a way, maybe new army, but
interesting
for 40K. No, I'm orcs hardcore.
Interesting. Very
nice.
cool.
Cool. Yeah. For myself, I'm actually a little victim of our conversation last time, and that I've said since right before 10th edition drops, like I want to come back and I want to bring Eldar out again. I've had multiple Eldar armies over the years, starting with Epic, and then second edition, and then fifth edition had Eldar armies also. For me, it's time to bring them back, and starting with a combat patrol. For the box, because it's just such a great jumping in point, I'm going to start with the Eldar Combat Patrol box, and am excited because it's a new edition, clean slate on that one, new way to start an army that's completely different from my Marines or my Necrons, something like that. And I'm all in. It'll be just kind of slow and sure thing. And by the time a Codex actually comes out, because I'm guessing that book is about a year out, like. I'll be able to have lots of options that are ready to go. So.
Hank raised an interesting point about, it being established with the Codex and stuff. When I first got into playing Chaos, I was playing Death Guard.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that was I was able to get help because people had been working on it for a while. And so like, I didn't know where to start to build out that army. And this guy was like, here's how you want to think about using demons. Cause at the time you just took generic demons as your add-on. I just used plague bearers for that. Here's how you want to use them to score objectives. Here's what you need, blah blah blah. I was like, oh. And so like it literally helped me build a list, and then we modified it so that I could just understand where to start. But I think combat patrol boxes fill that void initially,
right? Yeah, at
least give you a sense, a taste of this is what it's like.
A really natural kind of stepping stone of where do you take it from there.
But it is a good point on Hank's part, actually.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next question. So I'm going to start with Hank on this one, and we're going to. We've kind of alluded to these or addressed them more specifically to some degree, but how would you define yourself as a 40K gamer, i.e., narrative, casual, competitive, etc.? And then with the new edition drop, do you think that's going to remain true? And are you curious to expand into a new direction a little bit more or less, just the way the game shaped up?
Yeah, so it might be a little surprising. Before this edition, I consider myself more of a narrative and thematic player. I do a lot of tournaments because, like I said, I love the community and playing, but like I never cared really how I did. Did a lot of 1 and 2s and 3 and 2s at 5 event. Like I've never come close to competing for a tournament. And I wanted to build armies that I liked how they looked. And for orcs, it was always a lot of boys. So 9th edition Codex I actually wasn't a big fan of because boys weren't great and you didn't want to run them in big units. I always felt really bad about that. But that's largely how I felt myself. And I love creating my own fluff. I've written an Index Imperialis article for my Sisters of Battle because I made an order called the Order of the Penitent Saint. I wrote one for a Space Marine chapter I'm not even painting and have no interest in collecting, but they fit into the setting I'm making.
Nice, yeah.
And so stuff like that. But like I said, I always attended competitive events. For the edition, I am actually not excited about the rules of this edition. I started playing in 3rd, and I played 3rd. I played a lot of 4th. I played a ton of 5th. 6th, 7th, I played less of. 8th, like I already mentioned, played a ton. I liked 8th because I thought the sacrifices, the things we lost that I liked, were worth what we gained in a game that was easier and cleaner to play.
Yeah.
And I thought I felt the same about 9th. Now it's 10th, I finally realized, I'm like, at this point, I think there's a lot of rules that I really liked that are no longer in the game. I actually like armor facing, and it was gone, and I missed
maybe your cup of tea.
Well, and that's why I started thinking about it. And I was like, maybe there's a version of the game with those rules, but I still like the models and I still love the community because I talked earlier about how great the community is. So I've just chosen, instead of being disappointed that I can't play the game in the way that I thought I'd enjoy it, I'll just focus on the competitive thing. So instead of building an army that I think is the thematic that I want to play, I'm going to play with the models I still think are cool. I'll convert cool models, but I'm going to gear the list towards winning missions and doing stuff. And I've won a best painted army at an event, which is less interesting because it was just there were only like 5 people with painted armies. So I won out of a small category.
Almost by default.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there was only one other guy that I really was competing against, but it still felt good. I still have that little
of course.
thing.
It still counts.
Yeah. And so now I'd like to win one of those one-day tournaments, those 3-game tournaments. That's my goal for this edition. If I can win one of those tournaments, go to some big game. If I can win, and if I can go to like a GT and only lose one game across the whole GT, that would feel great. So it's funny because we've alluded a lot to me being a more competitive voice, but that's a recent churn. That is what I'm focusing on for this edition, because I want to enjoy the models. I want to enjoy the hobby, the painting, and I want to enjoy the community. I'm approaching the game from a different way. I'm going to play the rules. I'm going to play them to win games, and I'm hoping that will be enough. And then I'm going to collect some Horse Heresy and play that dumb game with all its complicated rules a couple of times a year. That's my goal.
That's fascinating, actually.
Yep, sounds like a good goal. Yeah, makes sense too.
Winning's a theme.
Yeah, winning is a theme. That's not what he said.
Orcs never lose. Don't forget.
Yeah, it's like corn. Corn always wins.
Yeah.
Skulls were collected.
It was always the plan of Zeech.
Yeah, exactly. Neris, let's go with you next. How would you define yourself as a 40K gamer, again, category-wise? And does this edition, the new edition, have you kind of curious to blend those lines at all, try something new, go in a different direction with that?
I definitely, up until this edition, would have called myself a very much casual, somewhat leaning narrative, but almost pretty hard set and casual. My list I ran for like my first year in the game was add mech with knights, so performed okay, but not great.
Yeah, very thematic then.
This edition, though, I am wanting to lean a bit more competitive, but for me to do that, I think it's going to be pushing my local store to actually start hosting larger and larger events. But competitive is what I'm looking forward to, because I am interested in getting better at the game and actually trying to win games, which is not a very common occurrence for me.
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, welcome to the club.
Yeah. It's fun's being had. Does the clean slate of everything being indexes with still thematic and flavorful rules, but there's just, I guess, just less bloat at this point. Does that have more appeal for you as a wanting a competitive, curious player, I guess?
Yes, actually, especially having basically 95% of your rolls on the index cards in front of you. It's really helpful for me, because then I'm not trying to flip through pages of my book every time I need to double check what one of my models does, or this is this character's special ability. I can have it right there on a card in front of me.
Yeah,
and so it speeds things up for me a crap ton.
Yeah,
Nice.
How about you, Carl?
Listen, I'm narrative. I make no bones about it. Casual, probably lately casual, but getting more serious. And what I mean by that is playing more games.
Sure.
More narrative games. One of the things we did when we first got into this game in 4th edition, not you necessarily, I was not part of your group at that point, was the group that we got in jumped in too far too quick, meaning we started running a campaign, and in the campaign, winners and losers mattered, and it was a map conquest campaign, and I love campaigns. I absolutely love campaigns. Not ready to jump into that yet. Yeah. Like, let's get a bunch of games under us. Yeah. Let's get the rules down. Let's figure out what works for us, what doesn't work for us. Then we go from there. But eventually I'd love to start playing campaigns. I'd love to start playing the, what's the tracking? Crusade system. I'd love to do all that. Let me get the basics down first. I got to walk before I run. I've learned that lesson the hard way last time. So that's me for sure. What about yourself?
Nice. Yeah.
You can play competitively. Like you're a good player. There is no doubt about that.
I have put myself in all three of these categories at different times, depending on the edition or life or etc. So definitely used to play in a lot more tournaments, can play competitively. I think I can hold my own. But also generally just enjoy the game casually, hanging out, playing with friends, telling a story with it. I tend to enjoy games that more naturally tell stories to them, just how they play, which is why I lean towards a lot more kind of skirmish scale games like Titanicus and Necromunda, because just what happens on the tabletop tends to tell a story in that way, and you can tie it into an existing campaign or something too. This edition, similar to Neris here, I am actually leaning a little bit more towards potential for competitive play, which I have not said since like 6th edition was my last tournament. I took best overall at a local tournament here, and I was like, all right, I'm good. I'm hanging up the Spurs, got my trophy,
out as a winner,
going out on top. But here we are 4 editions later, and a lot of it for me is the appeal of this clean slate of Index Hammer. Like Index Hammer, I think is a really fun way to play the game.
I agree.
We don't have codex creep. We don't have a lot of rules bloat. We don't
and people are still learning.
It's kind of pure, simple, and fun, but really flavorful. I feel like these indexes have a lot more flavor than the 8th edition indexes did. And that was still a really fun time to play the game. But now, just the way stratagems, unit rules, and everything are coming together. Like it just has me really excited to play the game. And for the first time in a really long time, I was like, yeah, maybe I do want to go to a tournament.
Interesting. Maybe we will.
Yeah,
I may be down.
Yeah, it'd be fun if nothing else. A good way to play with a bunch of new people and try out different armies that aren't in the local pool.
Josh, every winner needs a loser, so I'll go be your loser.
Well, we'll just do some team games like we did for Adepticon Titanicus, and
you can carry me across.
You get the personality votes, and I get the games won.
You're like Sam, and I'm Frodo in Lord of the Rings. You're like, you may, but I can carry you.
Carry you. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so next question. Let's start with you, Neris, on this one. Without having seen any codexes for this edition, what are the few must-haves that you want to see in these codexes once these books start releasing?
Well, there's only really one that I'd actually have much to say about, which is the Blood Angels one.
I knew this was coming. Hey, that's fair.
Yeah. And that is, I feel like the Blood Angels Codex needs to have some way to address the fact that most of their jump pack characters and stuff no longer have things to run with.
Yes.
So many of them had 2 units they can run with. They're down to 1. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that 1 get replaced with a new book if they release a whole new model for it. But I feel like they need a way to address the sudden loss of a major part of their army.
He's just going to do jump pack Marines.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, which I never really thought about before. And that like Sanguinary Guard, Assault Marines, things like that, they are not Primaris Marines. So you have some of your these are cores of this army, the playstyle.
Jump pack Death Company.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Oh, those guys were meaty as heck in 4th and 5th edition. Yep. Loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good call.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I'll go.
Yeah,
next.
how about you?
So look, as a Thousand Suns player, I want to see different schools of Magic come into play here. We saw that towards in 9th edition. It runs the risk of being a little complicated. Look, I'll be a chaos friendly guy. Like I want to see marks make a huge difference. I loved there's always harkening back to the 3rd edition of the Chaos Codex, where you could really tailor your army to various various chaos gods and that kind of thing. I'd love to see that. So for me, a must-have is for 1,000 Suns, a bunch of schools, but also I want to see the Chaos Codex be flexible to multi-god and single god support.
Do you see the Chaos Codex, the generic Chaos Marine Codex, being the Black Legion book, really?
Yeah.
And then you're going to have World Eaters, Death Guard, Thousand Suns.
Yeah, and I think you are. It's important to me that those units be able to be included in that Chaos Codex, and I think they're leaning that way. I mean, but that's a must-have, and I'd love to be able to take advantage of some of those neat ideas that they have for berserkers, Khorne berserkers, and that kind of thing, because I have in my mind some ideas for things I want to do, like the Hounds of Abaddon, who are Khorne worshippers,
right,
and I want to have a unit like that. I want to have a unit of Death Guard that are allied with Black Legion. Like I want to be able to mix all that stuff up. Aaron Diskey-Bowden wrote a really interesting piece about the Black Legion, which is when you're fighting the Black Legion, you're not just fighting a bunch of Chaos Space Marines. You're fighting Chaos Space Marines. You're fighting the Lost and the Damned, the cultists, the demons. When the Black Legion arrives on a planet, the skies are blotted out by their ships, and and I'm like, yes, I want to. include
That's right.
knights and
Beastmen who came back and Kill Team.
Yes.
They're gonna be in the book.
Beastmen, knights, war dogs. I want all of that. I want it all.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
That's a good answer. Yeah, makes sense. How about you, Hank?
The thing I must have that I know will not happen is I want to see the rules still be available for free. Not going to happen. That's what I would love. One thing I think is so cool, because since they're going with this plug and play style of extra special rules where your detachment, if you don't choose that detachment, you're getting a different set of things. Mm-hmm. That allows them to do more stuff and focus on, well, not focus, diversify. To go to Blood Angels with Neris and what they said about how, like, oh, we don't have enough jump pack Marines. When I started collecting Blood Angels, there were jump pack Marines, but another part of their identity was overcharged rhinos.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And that has basically faded from gameplay.
That's right, because they were super fast. Like every vehicle they had was super
Rhinos
fast.
And ball predators, if I remember.
Yeah. They were the only ones that got ball predators initially.
Also,
I'm too young to remember those.
Oh man, those were the days. Those were those guys were fast.
Yep. You would actually usually only have like just your Death Company where the jump pack Marines. You might take some Assault Marines, but like a lot, like in a 3rd or 4th edition Blood Angel army was actually a bunch of dudes inside rhinos.
Right.
And so, and that's just basically faded as the rules.
That's right.
8th edition, maybe early. It's been a while, but at least in 8th edition
faded,
forward.
It faded after. It faded in 6th edition.
Yeah. I think it's similar to how each of the Chaos Gods kind of have their own book and that flavor. Like each of the Marine chapters outside of your core Marines, so like Blood Angels, Space Wolves, White Scars, etc., have all really kind of leaned into that one thing that they really do. Yeah. It's like,
and so that'll be cool when because they did show us that a Dark Angels Codex is coming. So it's safe to assume all the chapters are going to get the big chapters. You get their own book. You're going to get different detachments, and that's going to diversify what you can do. Dark Angels, it's easy. Obviously, they were going to get Deathwing. They were going to get Ravenwing. But I'm hopeful for like Blood Angels again, even though I'm no longer collecting them. Just in my heart, I'm hopeful that they'll get one that's they'll have a Flesh Tears one for sure, or maybe an Angel Sanguine one, but like maybe a Rhino one that you don't have to be reliant on jump packs. And that is something I'm excited about, is seeing more, because they freed themselves from not having to worry about rules bloat by saying, whatever special rules we give you, you're losing, you're trading out other things for. It means we can now, if you like, as an Orc player, if you want a Cult of Speed, then you very specifically have this. But if you want a Dreadwall, so that's what I'm hoping to see, is that I want to see a codex. I want it to just be full of detachments, and they don't all have to be good. But if they're just so flavorful, that's what I want to see.
You know what? Hank Bell bringing the heat, man. That is a really good answer.
I'm in a similar.
No, I want to go back to his answer. I like his answer.
My answer to this is ditto to Hank. And that, very similar. Like I want to see a lot of detachment options that give you, like, maybe it's just that one rule that makes a difference, but how that rule interacts with everything in that army. Because you only get one detachment rule, right? So,
I think that's what I was talking about to a degree with the Thousand Sons and the Schools of Magic. They made such a difference, I think, and created a lot of variety. One of the problems with that was, as Hank alluded to, they don't have to all be balanced. Well, yeah, but there were really two schools that everybody would take, really.
Right.
Because they were just, they leaned towards more powerful. Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. And a couple of things, like being a Marine player or a Necron player, like I would love to see Dynasty rules or chapter taxes or things like that just give you a little bit more flavor to the same units that are out there. Like I don't need different rules for every single model out there, but just that one little thing that
I'm going to be surprised if that doesn't happen. I'm going to be surprised if that doesn't happen.
I agree.
I don't know if it happened to the degree that, man, I forgot about Blood Angels having fast rhinos and stuff. That was so cool.
Yep.
I don't know.
A bunch of red rhinos.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It's a great.
Red ones go faster.
That's a great.
Everyone knows this.
Yeah, look, it just led me to eventually. It was always meant to be.
You were always meant to be an orc.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question up here is list building.
Question.
Last question.
Yeah.
Final question.
All right.
Final Jeopardy. List building has been a little polarizing for some people, partially because it's just the points. There's not options on there. It's kind of like power level, but it's using points. But then you also, because it's a mix between points and power level, you get some weird points gaps where maybe you're 50, 100 points down. Maybe it's like that 60-point window that Marines especially, like it's hard to fill that gap. So how are you guys finding the actual building process? And let's start with Hank on this one. the list building process. And then the follow up to that is, how about just the actual force organization chart being kind of like thrown out the window, and it's just really open now. You need your character, no more than 3 of anything, and max of 6 when it comes to battle line or dedicated transports. Just curious to see thoughts on these.
Yeah, this is kind of what I alluded to before when I said, like, we've chipped away at so many rules over time. This was the thing that finally, because I was getting excited for 10th, and then when this wasn't quite revealed, just when they showed us the rules and we pieced together that, oh, all these units are in set sizes and you buy them in set sizes and there's no war gear costs. That was the final point where I suddenly realized, I think I've given up too many of the rules I thought were interesting. There's been a ship of Theseus, except for instead of a ship, it's now a train. And that's kind of, so like, I was really bummed. And that's kind of what led me to being like, well, if I just refocus how I think about the game. So to answer that question, no, I don't like it. It is power level. It's just multiplied by a different number there's little things. I'm not heartbroken that I might end up with a 1980 list. I know some people really feel strongly that they want to hit it on the dot. That part doesn't bother me. But it's just the inability to choose things, to make decisions, because some of them feel like they're made for me. It's also added some complexity, and there's reward gear you never took before. Now you got it. You take it. Like I said, I built Red Herds. I also built Rocket Boys because a rocket is just straight up better than a big shooter. Like a big shooter has its niche. That niche doesn't matter. I'm gonna always want a rocket.
Right.
But that complicates my unit. Because now when I shoot, instead of not having that, I have a different gun. And that's a little less important on a boy because it's one extra gun. There are some units where all of a sudden, like, they have so many different weapons because you're not paying war gear costs. Yep. And that is a complication that I think they didn't factor in their simplified but not simple system. Like, if suddenly your unit has 6 different guns, that means every time you shoot it, people are reviewing this data sheet and they're reading and they have to roll them in different batches.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's something.
It slows it down.
Yeah, it slows it down. I don't like it. And that is really the last thing that made me go, okay, I got to refocus on what I enjoy about the game. And in this case, it's just rolling dice and playing games.
It's very interesting.
The thing about opening up the force building requirements, like, that's the direction we've been heading. The old CAD almost hadn't mattered. It's so long. The points in 9th edition where you actually hit, like, as long as you can make your minimum requirements, that you so rarely actually hit the maximum number of units in a slot. It would happen to some armies in their elite slot, which in 9th edition, they gave you 6 elite slots. Once you factor in the characters, the bonus slots for characters. So getting rid of that, just like, that's the direction we were going. So I'm happy that just that one is, like, again, one of those things that if I'm playing a game, I would rather have a detachment system, but the direction we were going, I'm glad that's over. It does make originally making some lists difficult because I'm like, I don't know what a list looks like anymore. I used to know,
yes.
That,
Yeah,
there was a framework
wide open. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I started playing the game a little, I'm like, okay, now I know what I need the army to start doing. And in that case, it's very freeing. The only downside being that, like, I know for some people, the 3 of a single unit, how they've broken up units and unit sizes and stuff, such as like Gretchen Art Battle Line. And Gretchen can only go to size 20. So if you have more than 60 Gretchen, you will never play with them. Unless you turn them into mech gunners, unless you already had enough mech guns, stuff like that. That part, but that's less to do with the building restrictions as much as them just choosing on how they set unit sizes and stuff.
It messes up Justin's building philosophy, which was find the best unit, take 6 of them.
Nice. How about you, Nares?
For the points and power level thing, the only thing that really bugs me about it is I can't take, I need to fill this little bit of gap. I'll take an extra 3 assault marines, or an extra,
or a melt-a-gun, or
I have been using the character enhancements to fill that slot though, because there's enough of them there, and if you're running characters in almost every unit like I find myself prone to, it's really easy to assign those enhancements to a meaningful location and fill in that gap. Doesn't mean that those are the last step in me building a list, but it's filling that role for me.
Other than that, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan, but it's functioning for me.
Okay.
The opening up of force building requirements, again, I kind of saw that coming. As well as I was never hitting the limits anyway to start with, aside from HQs. Like I don't almost always find myself hitting the HQ limit.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
I found the 9th edition army building rules to be frustrating for me. Like it was overcomplication a lot of times. Like what force org am I going to take now? What thing here and what thing here? And I just felt like, God, I just want to play the game. 10th edition does, and I reserve the right to change my opinion later.
Nope, it's on the record
no.
here.
I'm getting it tattooed tonight.
Because like Combat Patrol. Like at first, I loved the concept. I got into it. I'm like, this isn't the way I'm going to play. But I could see it getting a little more complicated in the force organization rules. I wouldn't mind a little more structure there. To Hank's point, it kind of gave you some guidance on how to build an army. Now it's just like, hey, do whatever you want.
What do you want?
I mean, there's a little bit, but
it's open play, but it's not.
As far as the points go, well, we were playing Age of Sigmar before, so
before it even had points.
Yeah. So we saw how this went in Age of Sigmar, and it was like, oh, this is very easy. Like at first, it was difficult to wrap my head around. As you know, I was a huge fan of power level.
Yeah.
I'm not whatever gets me on the table faster, I'm a huge fan of. And so in that regard, this gets me on the table faster, and I'm enjoying it very much. Could it be a little more structured? I mean, yes. I feel like this is not a battle I'm willing to have. I'd rather have the battle on the table. And so I'm just going to put out what I want to put out, and it allows me to build a thematic army the way I want it.
Yeah.
I am one of those people where that niggling 20 points or 5 points that's left kind of drives me bonkers. And I've even gone so far as to sometimes say, well, I'm going to pull this unit out then, and I'm going to, I got to get over that a little bit. I'm trying to get in that range, in that
right.
little range of points,
Yep.
and for me and my friends, I'm even flexible on you went 5 points over, 10 points over. It doesn't really matter so much to me. But I think, I don't know, that cap I think is there for a reason. I'd rather be under that cap by a few points than over it.
Yeah.
Me personally.
Agreed.
So that's what I do. And I just have to say, am I willing to give up those 10 points because again, those 10 points don't matter as much as they used to.
Right.
That's the concept that it's hard to get over.
They really don't now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because, I take all these guys and I can have I can have a power fist and I can have a bunch of power fists and I can, it doesn't matter. It's kind of all factored in. I do think it'll tend to lean towards people making units kind of the samey for a lot of times,
Yeah.
As
mathematically, there are better options.
As Hank said, the rocket launcher is clearly a better option here. Why would I not take the rocket launcher? Yeah, you're going to take the rocket launcher. The question then becomes, why do they make this other gun on the sprue?
Yeah.
So, but we've seen that even with points additions. We've seen that. Geez Louise, look at how many Havoc boxes I bought because the Havocs, is that the heavy?
Yeah.
Because that heavy rotor gun was.
That's such a cool model.
It is.
I don't care what the rules do. It's the best looking model.
but I mean, when we were building Shell's Night Lords, I was like, oh, look, I have 3 Havoc boxes. Oh, look, only 1 Marine is missing from each of these 3 Havoc boxes.
Huh.
Because that was the only way to get it. You had to buy a whole box for that one thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, look, I think this happens regardless. Play what you want to play. And I think this gets me on the table faster.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's
me.
a great point.
That's me.
Yeah. I'll just do a quick summary for myself in that similarly, I like that you can build a thematic list very quickly. I've always personally enjoyed the list building aspect and the tinkering and things like that. And I keep finding myself with Marines, especially of like there's a 50-point window and it's like there's just nothing in the list that I can use to fill that. So I am doing
previously you would be like, oh, melted
I
down
can
here, power
change a
fist
little
on
war
this guy.
gear, something like that, add a relic, whatever. And I have filled some of that with enhancements to get some of those points. But similar to what you were just saying, like I don't need to hit whatever
it on the nose.
1,000 points on the nose, 1,500 points on the nose. But if I've got this 50-point block, then I'm like, okay, now I'm dropping a unit to get something else in there to try and
we've spent years being trained to think that
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
To squeeze every bit of juice out of the grape.
I've been playing since 2nd edition, so I've got a lot of that habit
a lot
built
of grapes
in
to
here.
squeeze.
Yeah. I've crushed a lot of grapes with these toes. Made a lot of wine. So for me, it's I guess it's more of a force of habit, something different.
Yeah.
Where power level was easier to hit that number. Like we were playing a 55 power level game. If I'm a power level down, that's not a big deal, and that felt easier to hit than this. This weird 50-point gap that I just don't have points to fill. Which
let's see what happens. I think I don't know. Let's see what happens. I predict that we all kind of adjust over time.
Yeah.
Listen, Steve Jobs got rid of the earphone jack on the iPhone, and everybody went up in arms about it. Next thing you know, I'm like, I always connect with Bluetooth anyway. I don't want a cable.
Now everybody
what do I want a
Bluetooth
cable
headphones.
for?
Yep.
So maybe this is a step in the right direction.
It's the innovation of the future.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah. Great discussions, great questions, and I'll kick it back over to you. Carl.
Okay. So listen, we're gonna. This is great. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Hank, Naris, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're gonna take a short break, then we're gonna come back, and we're just gonna close out the show. All right, we're back to close out the show. First thing I want to just thank is our 2 guests. You guys have been awesome. I really appreciate you folks joining us. Naris, thank you so much for responding to me in the Discord channel and wanting to jump in. We appreciate that you've joined us. And Hank, you've been a delight for me to make fun of, but you know what? That's how you know you like somebody. You're willing to make fun of them. But no, it's in all seriousness, great conversation, you guys. I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, thank you both. Great perspectives and opinions. And while we had a lot of agreement, it was cool to just kind of hear your perspective from a different mindset of how you approach the game, which was great.
This is what I liked about Hank's perspective. It wasn't always mine, and
exactly,
I appreciate that. And you made some really great points.
Enlightening.
Yeah. So. In that vein, Naris, let's start with you. What's your local game store called? Where is it located if people are interested in your area?
So my local game store is Bastion Games. It's in Chilliwack, BC, Canada. But other names for the area is the Fraser Valley.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And that's where you're playing normally and setting stuff up.
Yeah, that's where I'm playing normally, and I'm also somewhat working with them to actually try to get semi-regular wargaming nights going on.
That's awesome. It always takes one person just to drive it, and then it gets going. So.
And best of luck building your whether it's a league or a competitive scene or whatever there that you had alluded to earlier. Hopefully that happens for you. So and hopefully if any listeners are in the area here, reach out.
Yeah, for sure.
Check out the store.
All right, and Hank, what about you? You already said your game store once, but give it again.
Well, so there's a bunch of them, and the closest one is Imperial Outpost, which I love. But I also want to give a special shout out. I'm wearing their shirt. This is for Gamers Guild in Tempe, and one reason I want to point them out is one, it's a huge store. It's a massive store. It's insane. It is a passion project from the group of owners. They have themselves a code of conduct they enforce, and what I love about it is it's such an inclusive store and community that me in all my position of privilege just feel so great for the people that they actively combat what can be harsh toxicities that permeate a lot of gaming communities. And Gamers Guild, besides just being an amazing store with so much stuff and running tons of events, the fact that they are such a lovely group of people that are so active and making a good, safe place to play. If you ever find yourself in the Valley of the Sun, see if you can't swing by Gamers Guild, because
listen,
an place.
You can count on it if I make my way down there. Yeah. Absolutely, and I'll
just
reach
come
out
in the winter.
And I'll reach out. Yeah, well, obviously, duh. But I
will
will reach out
up here.
But I'll reach out. Yeah, I won't come in the winter up there. But I'll reach out to you in advance when that happens. So that sounds like an amazing environment that you're in. So great stuff. Josh, you got anything else you want to throw out there?
We got YouTube videos going.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Check out the YouTube channel. I mean, especially now that I'm leaving my job, we're looking at creating more video content as well that will be exclusive to that. and then eventually some stuff that's going to be exclusive to our Patreon. So now that I'm going to have the time, Josh and I are going to sit down and hammer all this stuff out. If you listen, wherever you're listening to us or wherever you're watching us, please do leave a review, give us a thumbs up, the whole shenanigans there. It does help everybody else see it. We got a great, fantastic Facebook group. We got a Discord channel that you can join. So yeah, it's all good stuff. It's a great community of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I think I said last episode still, but and growing, like it's reactivating in a lot of ways with 10th edition, with the show coming back.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like just a very
Everybody's
consistent
getting back on the train.
Yeah, addition of people joining up the community.
Yeah. Getting back on. Oh, and speaking of trains, that's one thing I did want to call out was earlier Hank's mention of a ship of Theseus being a train. Nice job working that in. I have actually recently talked about the ship of Theseus with my wife, trying to explain the concept, the philosophical concept behind it. If you don't know what it is, well, go look it up. It's kind of quite interesting. So with that said, I think we'll just close out the show at this point. So this is Carl.
This is Josh.
This is Hank.
And this is Neris.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where our objective, as it has always been, is to make you feel like a part of our gaming group.
And a new edition can really be that reset we've all been wanting.
And the rules may be different, but WA never changes.
Oh my God. That sounds like just like something Jody would say.
It is something Jody would say. He's a former.
He broke my heart.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so much. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.